Hi everyone, welcome to Martech Brain, a Netcore initiative where we speak to the best brains in Martech and delve deep into one topic. My guest today is Pibaswan Banerjee, Director CRM Strategy and User Analytics at Klook in Singapore. Pibaswan previously worked with Airtel in India, Grab, and Hook, that's HOOQ, a JV between Singtel, Warner Brothers, and Sony in Singapore. His chosen topic for discussion today is omni-channel personalization, or if I sort of expand it in the right way, it's personalization at scale across multiple consumer touchpoints on and off platforms. And Pibaswan has very interesting thoughts on personalization, and they will probably not be very obvious. He's got some new angles which we're going to talk about today. So welcome to Martech Brain, Pibaswan.
Thanks, Rajesh. Thanks for having me.
So my first question to you is, everyone talks about personalization, omni-channel personalization, etc.
Yeah.
So tell us what's different about your thinking and how should we be doing it right?
Yeah, sure. So I think, this is not a new topic. It's been like beaten to death, personalization, omni-channel, orchestration, etc. All of this. It's just that, over my career, what I've, come to realize is that, people tend to, look at one aspect of personalization and get too fixated with it. So, for instance, most people, when they think about personalization, think about recommender systems, right? So they think about, okay, we'll show a bunch of things which the consumer may like, and we have a higher chance of driving conversion rates and down funnel revenue and so on. But actually, there is a lot more to personalization beyond just, let's say, a recommender system. So there are, in fact, it's the one part of the problem where a lot of work has gone in. There are loads of plug and play systems where companies and brands can get off the shelf recommender systems into their product. But then there are other aspects of it. One key aspect that is becoming a very big problem in the e-commerce industry is offer management, right? So what is the next best offer for the consumer? Because if you look at e-commerce today, consumers kind of like expect they have a promo code, they have a coupon code, they will get some cash back, they will get something or the other, right? And it's kind of like baked into the purchase funnel. It's an integral part of the purchase journey. And the way marketers or business owners look at it is it's kind of like already there in the strategy that we have to at least give a perceived discount to the consumer. So there is a pricing strategy behind it. What are the mechanics of offering such a discount? Is it via cashback, or do we give something which is flat off, right? And typically the problem is like we can afford to give up to X percentage off, which is sitting in somewhere between a range of Y and Z. X is kind of like the sweet spot in between. Some consumers get more, some consumers get less. For some, the mechanics are different. Some get it as a cashback, some get it as a straight away, flat discount. So personalization is that as well. It is not just what we are suggesting you buy, but at what price and how we are trying to structure the package. So that's one aspect of it. Second is like the whole marketing mix. We have so many channels and more are coming up. So for instance, now you have like shopping over live streaming, which is a very big deal in China, getting very big in Southeast Asia, will probably be in India as well when we have 5G, coming in. So with so many different channels and touch points, it's pretty confusing for the marketer and the marketing business owner. Where do we invest, right? So because the marketing dollars are somewhat fixed, and that's where there's a second layer of personalization where we have to decide which segments are best marketed over a certain channel. So that is again sitting alongside your problem of offer management or revenue management, as I spoke about, and the recommender aspect, which has been discussed to death. So I think these three things are very fundamental to it, and then also like the overall consumer journey on the product. Right, so there can be certain pages or landing page experiences which are very, very, very different for a certain segment of consumer. But that again fits broadly into the omni-channel scope that we started this discussion with. So omni-channel essentially refers to having a unified and consistent messaging for the consumer across all the various touchpoints, be it email, app notifications, whatever else we have, landing page banners, on-platform banners. So this is also an aspect of personalization. But again, I think the industry overall has made a lot of progress on this, and people do tend to think of these things once personalization is mentioned. But yeah, I would just like to conclude my my answer to this question saying that omni-channel personalization has been there for quite some time. The industry has made progress, but obviously there are things where we can get a lot better. Similarly, for recommender systems, a lot has been done, but again, a lot can be done more, right? Where I think there is not as much progress is the offer and revenue management aspect of it, because these things are guarded very closely by companies, because there is an aspect of strategy and very sensitive items related to pricing, which companies don't tend to trust outside parties with. So the plug and play aspect of recommender systems tends to go away at this level. And also the broader marketing mix modeling, like how do I invest on SEM, how do I invest on social, how do I invest on the own media, KOL influencers. AI has a pretty big role to play on this, but probably we haven't progressed as much as we have on the aspects that I just discussed.
I think that's a great overview. So essentially what you're saying is that there are 4 aspects, 2 of which are sort of there, which marketers tend to think about, and 2 are not. The 2 that we talk about are the recommender systems and ensuring that personalization should cover all channels, the omni-channel.
Mm-hmm. Correct. But we don't do it properly. Don't get me wrong. It's not that we crack it. Yeah,
we're going to cover that also. We'll come to that.
Yeah.
But there are 2 new ideas that you're bringing into the play in a way that marketers should also bring into their mix. First is this idea around offer and revenue management. We'll talk about that. And second is the modeling the marketing mix. So which segments, which channels, etc. So let's start with the offer and revenue management part. So what you're basically saying is that not only is it about just identifying which product, but also what is the price point, pricing part also, what is the discount to be offered, etc. That I think becomes what you're saying is that's an important element of how you communicate to the customer.
Correct.
And why is this not really looked upon as personalization per se? I mean, sometimes it's missed out. I mean, people just think, okay, next best action, what is it? Next best offer, what is it? You have to send this out and send that out, send that offer out, etc. Why is this being missed out today?
Hey, it's a tough problem. I guess the answer to that is like, companies start on this journey. They do realize it's getting increasingly important. So, there is brand loyalty is wavering in some of the more hotly contested sectors, especially, for instance, in travel, like flights and hotels are basically commodities, right? So how do you drive any kind of differentiation on this? So similarly, in any sector where there is, the product or the offering is not really driven by the consumer is not coming back because of brand loyalty or because of something that is setting a particular company apart, these things become integral tools in driving the end conversion. So that realization is there. I wouldn't go as far as saying that people don't know this, but actually, getting it done is something is a far more complex challenge. So people tend to look at pricing strategy as something which is more high, overarching, like for certain products or certain categories, this is the range within which I'm offering. But after a certain point, because these teams tend to operate within ROI constraints, that this is the envelope that I'm operating in within the constraint of such and such ROI. To eke out that extra performance, people need to go at far more granular levels, where you have to look at user groups. Certain segments will probably be a little bit more accommodating. So essentially, the price elasticity part of it, and not just the price elasticity, but also the offer mechanics. Maybe some people are willing to take a cash back in the wallet, right? So which essentially translates to a discount given on a future purchase, not on the current one. However, some people will only convert if that discount is baked into the price of the current product, which probably has a residual LTV down the line. So coming to that level of detail and having the analytical backbone to support it and make it actionable for end users is something that is increasingly looked upon as a tough problem. People are investing in it, but we haven't yet gotten there. That's what I would want to say.
How can companies do this right? So I have one clarification before that. Are you also suggesting that essentially 2 different people for the same product could actually get 2 different price points, 2 different offers? That also is possible, or we are saying that it's a cohort or a category?
Yeah, so I don't think it is going to be possible to get to that individual consumer level anytime soon, but definitely like broad segments can be treated a little differently. And a lot of the e-commerce type offers, if you see, are essentially merchandising offers. They are not really sponsored by the platform itself. It's like other partners who are providing these offers. And typically the way these things work is like you have a set number of such discounts you can offer to some consumers. So maybe they are selectively offered to a priority set, people who have a higher chance of converting. So there's an opportunity loss associated with merchandising offers as well. So if we have 100 such discounts to give away, which are the 100 consumers whom we should offer this? Because if we give it to somebody who's not going to respond to this, or who would have anyways converted within the offer, there's a opportunity loss associated with it, which translates to conversion and revenue loss.
So for this, the platform needs to, of course, know the customer very well. Because like if I'm going to be giving an offer, if I'm going to buy it anyways,
absolutely,
there is no reason to give me a discount. So
correct.
What is the input that is required for these decisions? What is the data that is required for driving these calls?
Yeah, absolutely, Rajesh. So as you mentioned, right? So identifying and analyzing which users is and what kind of inputs, as you mentioned. So things like frequency of purchase. I mean, these are kind of like the no-brainers, like some kind of product affinity or category affinity. Are there people who tend to gravitate towards certain classes of products, certain kinds of merchants or sellers, or maybe some specific types of experiences in terms of the product offering that we have? That's kind of like the starting point. The second part of it, which is really integral, is that the offer database or the levers that we have to drive conversion, we need to map those offerings with the user persona, if I may call it. It's a persona, again, is like a very broad term. I wouldn't want to like generalize only on this aspect, but mapping the user cohort with the offer cohort is kind of like bridging the link, and that is where a lot of work also needs to happen alongside just identifying the user segments which are valuable. Yeah.
Okay. Now, if we take up the second aspect of what you said, marketing mix modeling, dig into that a little bit more. What exactly?
Yeah, I think marketing mix modeling, again, is a very old term, right? It's been there for 40, 50 years. It's not new. It's just that it's getting increasingly complicated now. And that's because of in an era where digital channels are like overwhelming all other forms of channels, attribution is a huge issue, right? So there is a lot of attribution cannibalization. So people previously, the approach was, I have $100, I'm going to spend 40 on SEM, 30 on SEO, not SEO, maybe 30 on social, 20 on affiliates, 20 on something else, and so on and so forth. So that used to be attribution mix modeling, and the end output was like a single revenue number or a single gross profit or an ROI number that companies used to optimize towards. Now, essentially, the digital consumer is a single consumer, since he or she can be reached across so many different touch points. Assigning the value that each channel is bringing in is an attribution problem, right? So, and there are multiple different attribution models available. So if you go into Google, you have last touch, non-direct, you have weighted, you have cumulative, sequential, n number of things going on. And the problem right now is that this information can be overwhelming at times, and a lot of these attribution models, when applied in silos, can paint a picture which is very, very different at times, right? So a last touch non-direct attribution model can paint you a picture which is entirely different from what we are getting with a sequential weighted model. So the challenge of finding which type of attribution is more aligned with the business model of a particular company and what really makes sense is where the gap is. So a lot of companies or a lot of brands initially start off with a simple last touch non-direct, and whatever channel brought in the last converting traffic is the one that was responsible for it, and basis that decisions are taken how much we should invest. So just to give an example, I think since we are email is a very big deal for both of us, right? So email, for instance, open on an email is not tracked by a Google Analytics, right? So email is now we are going into the realms of AMP email, which are such rich experiences on the body of an email, and a marketer will spend time crafting the subject line to drive an open on the email. So typically you'll have 30% open rate, and probably like maybe 10% of those people will click through. It's only the 10% who click through will be able to compete with other attribution channels. So because that's the click which resulted in a session on the product, and that's what is tracked. So in the larger scheme of things, it is going to seem that okay, email brought in 100 customers, right? But effectively, before that email brought in that traffic, there were 1,000 customers who opened that email by looking at a subject line, saw a rich landing page like experience on the email, which is probably not even factored in while modeling in how much you should spend. And when I say spend email, you can show a promo code, you can have some gamification mechanics inside it, which probably will get lesser investment vis-a-vis another channel, which will have a higher last touch non-direct attribution. So essentially, what I'm trying to say is that in a digital world, the leakages in an attribution funnel are many and very difficult to plug. So marketing mix modeling is kind of like evolving along with it. So and now, as I mentioned, I keep mentioning this because I'm passionate about this, is like shoppable media, right? So many people are buying on live streaming. In China, it is such a huge deal. In 1 hour, you have $1 million worth of sales. How do you really attribute whether that that impression on that media really resulted in the purchase? Is it like some timestamp? Did the user complete the stream beyond a certain point? All of these elements will become super important, and it's a very tough challenge and problem to crack.
And now you also have newer channels emerging. Like in India, I think in the recent times, we have also seen the growth in WhatsApp.
Yep.
So another something which earlier was not there, but now it's becoming, as people with the reluctance of people to go in store, WhatsApp is becoming powerful.
Sure.
Not just engagement, but even the ability to then convert and pay through the platform.
Yeah. Correct. Yes, absolutely. It's a very big channel. Yeah.
In a way, when you were speaking, I'm reminded of when many years ago we used to talk about the challenges that airlines faced in optimization. You have so many seats. How do I maximize the revenue? In some ways, it's a similar problem that, okay, I can sell X products, so customers can buy Y products. Now, my goal is to maximize the revenue. In a way, the challenge is somewhat different in the sense that the goal really should be that for customers who are willing to pay full price, I don't want to give them a discount.
Correct. Exactly.
Otherwise, would not have. So it's almost like a curve where you want to figure out where the customer is, and what is the likelihood they're going to buy at what price.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So this is actually very interesting. It's a very new angle in the whole almost like personalization of the buying experience.
Yeah, exactly.
Probably a little bit more than that. So why is it becoming such an important element? This should really be this should be front and center. Of course, companies are collecting a lot of data now, but it doesn't seem to have that top of mind driving factor for CMOs as it should be. Why is it not yet front and center?
I think the reason is like people are still moving online, right? I mean, although it's happening rapidly, it's just that these problems were always known, people were aware of it, but they somehow were like back burner, P2, P3. With the with now people moving online at such a rapid pace, and it's even expected to increase. And then with the media mix also expanding rapidly with the new channels, as we discussed, it's really hard to be able to deploy marketing dollars or marketing investments, both in terms of resources, like where should we hire more, how much should we spend, etc. These channels were previously hire a social guy, hire a paid media guy, hire an email guy, you're done, right? So now it's like the social guy has to justify, on paid social, I invested on Line, I invested in WeChat, I invested on Facebook, I invested somewhere else, Instagram, all of these things. Similarly, the performance marketing guy has 5-6 different channels. In Southeast Asia, for instance, in Korea, you have Naver. So in China, you are doing on Baidu, right? Bing is becoming big. Microsoft Bing is taking share from Google. So essentially, it's becoming so fragmented. So decision making at that level, it's like exploding essentially. So the complexity of the channels has increased. More people are now online. So effectively, the deployment is shifting from on traditional media channels to online media channels. So the combination of these two things are bringing this problem more upright, in front of to the forefront, and that's why it's becoming discussed more, I guess.
And if a company wants to embark on this journey, if I as a CMO think that these ideas make a lot of sense, this is the direction that we should be going down on. So how do they get started on this journey? What is the personalization stack or something like this?
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's a really important question. So in my mind, the personalization stack, at the heart of it is the user base, right? So you have to know who your customers are, and so I would say the segmentation capability, be it a tool or be it some in-house capability that you have built, the ability to really like cohortize users is like at the heart of this whole stack. This has to be married with some kind of offer management system, which is where your loyalty programs, cashbacks, VIP programs, coins, credits, discounts, whatever else it is. And these two need to be linked at the hip, right? So the segmentation engine and the offer management or revenue management engine need to be linked. These two need to be now linked with what we call the multi-channel exposure. So great, we know which customer needs to be given what offer, but it is not going to work till the time we are able to amplify this message consistently. And by doing that, we need the multi-channel aspect or the omni-channel hub, as we call it. So email, app notifications, on-platform banners, be it tool tips on the product, Facebook custom audiences, Google remarketing list. There are so many line audiences, WeChat audiences, or everything, right? So if whatever supports user level marketing, that should be covered by this omni-channel hub. So these are the three things which are at the base. Then on top of all of this, I think what is important is orchestration, right? So it's one thing to really be able to send messages to consumers across multiple channels, and it's a totally different capability to be able to craft it as a journey, right? So to ensure that the channels are in sync. So if somebody has made a purchase, we need to like take him out of an audience, or maybe you first activate your free channels before you go to the paid channels. What is the right amount of delay that needs to be baked in before we activate an aggressive promo code or a coupon code, right? Because there's revenue loss. So that is the orchestration component of it, which sits alongside essentially your omni-channel hub. So it's not only about sending the right message to the right customer across the right channels, but also being able to craft it in a way that it is consistent and orchestrated. And you know, if I had to draw it, all of this is at the heart, and there is a big circle surrounding it, which is AI-driven personalization. So across all of these aspects, be it the channel mix, the offer, as I said, like offer management system is the offer management system, but what is the next best offer has to be driven by AI. Similarly, the the content, the recommender system will drive. So this bubble of AI-driven personalization essentially surrounds the four components that I just spoke about. So segmentation, offer management, omni-channel, orchestration, surrounded by AI-driven personalization is the stack that we have to build essentially.
Great. I think that's a fantastic overview, I think, on how to get going with it. Now, as a marketer, which are the most important metrics? So in every place, the key question becomes that, okay, I'm going to do all of this. How do I track the ROI of all of these investments? So how is the impact, incremental impact? How can we measure?
Yeah, I think this is as complicated a problem as the first part that we just discussed. But so I mean, again, there are existing frameworks to all of this. I mean, there's no rocket science. You have target group, control group. We can do multivariate tests, A/B tests, all of this. So this has been discussed to death. So what is important to understand here is that companies. At the top management level, there needs to be very few things that the management needs to be looking at. We cannot have a lot of granular metrics. So for instance, a CMO should not be looking at open rates or click rates. It's very counterproductive. So to bake incrementality into that stakeholder level or the management level metric that people are looking at is very important. So incremental revenue can be one such thing, or that we are looking at, an incremental revenue being computed as target versus control, or the sum total of all the experiments that we are doing. Having said that, I'm totally cognizant that it's not possible to maintain target groups and control groups across all channels. That is where it gets a little muddy. But at the same time, there are multiple techniques that can be applied, and some of them can be like seasonality analysis to like take out a baseline. Some pre-post, although it is very ridiculed, like pre-post analysis doesn't make sense. Pre-post analysis can make sense if done correctly and external variables are netted out. This is especially true for channels where, as I mentioned, you cannot create a control group, right? So for SEM, for instance, you can. For email, you can. Push notification, you can. But what about, let's say, affiliate marketing? How do you keep a control group in affiliate marketing? What about SEO? You cannot keep a control group for a person typing in organically. In such cases, the traffic can be segregated post hoc after the intervention has happened to get a sense of what was the uplift from a baseline to get a sense of incrementality. And these things, when netted out together, can be presented in the form of an incremental revenue North Star that the company looks like. Okay, this is where we started this quarter at as a baseline. This is where we would have anyways gotten to, and our interventions resulted in X percentage incremental. So this was all the first level at the management level. So at the next level, the challenge is to really attribute that incrementality to the various things that were done. So at times, for instance, when I spoke about an omni-channel campaign, for instance, we are sending an email, sending push, showing a banner, XYZ. Maybe it's a banner which had a disproportionate impact, right? But at a program level, we'll be able to compute the incremental revenue by keeping a control group saying that this program generated $100,000. But if I have to now apportion what portion of this 100,000 was driven by the email, what portion by the push, and what portion by the banner, it gets it becomes a more complicated exercise. But it is still possible in today's world because we are capturing so much data. But the right framework has to be developed, and then the output has to be done in a way where people can actually make use of this data to craft future programs. So yeah, I don't really have a kind of an answer which is going to sum all of it. It's pretty complicated, but I think to summarize, at the management level, it is important to not be fixated on n number of granular metrics which are not important to day-to-day running of the function or the business. But at a marketer level, the channel that you own, you need to go down to a lot of detail to be able to figure out what is working. So it's kind of like a dichotomy. So at the same time you need high-level metrics, and at the same time you need very granular metrics. The ones that are dangerous are the ones in middle. That's what I truly believe. So the ones in middle are things like the open rates, click rates. They conceal more than that they speak about. So from the management point of view, they should avoid these. They should look at the incremental revenue. And if you're a marketer who is actually focused on email marketing, you need to look a lot beyond open rate and click rate. So extremes is where we need to be at, I guess.
It's very interesting what you're basically the way you're describing the new emerging world of customer engagement and MarTech is almost like the evolution that AdTech, the world of AdTech went into. How it began earlier, all you calculated were the clicks and so on. And then there's a whole new science that came into the world of AdTech. And the same thing is now coming into the world of MarTech. So essentially, it's not just about seeing how many transactions you got and what retention you're getting or what is churn, but there's a lot of science now coming into at the transaction level, actually. So
correct.
Did you get the right amount of money that you should have got from that transaction for that customer? It's almost
precisely. Yep.
Fascinating. Are there one or two examples of either companies or industries which you think are where we are seeing early adoption of this at a much greater level than others? For example, in the world of personalization in the offline world, there was this famous story about casinos, how Hannah's actually used data probably 25 years ago to maximize the revenue from their guests in terms of the casinos. They knew each guest, they knew exactly which room to give and so on. So are there industries which you think will be pioneers? Are there or companies which you think are pioneers in this? Obviously, the names are Amazon, etc., would be doing some of this.
Yeah, absolutely. So it will be the same set of names who have been in the digital industry for quite some time and who have dominated, of course. But in terms of industries, I would say e-commerce is going to be the pioneer, right? So because it has, and it's not just Amazon was like a, kind of like a visionary company, but now e-commerce is much beyond Amazon. Like you have these pockets, your Tokopedia in Indonesia, so many different companies that are getting into it. And for them, this is a very important problem to crack. So they are investing lots of resources. I am fortunate to be in a similar sector, so I know the amount of impetus and focus that is there on these things. So I believe that is the sector that's going to lead the torch, and everything else will follow, I guess.
And this is also obviously very good news for end customers also. They get much more relevant offers, and this whole idea of almost prediction that the system can actually sense what you're going to buy next. And
correct. Yeah, actually, I could have said travel also, but I really don't feel travel is going to be, travel in the true sense of the flights and hotels, it is still very commoditized in that sense, right? So, and it's an extremely hard problem to predict, like where the consumer is going to buy the next flight to, unless you are in that business traveler segment. But again, my current company is not in the business of selling flights, and we have thousands of SKUs similar to an e-commerce platform essentially. And these companies, for them, it is like almost primitive to success that you figure out, where can I find that pocket of opportunity to drive incremental conversion rate. So I feel these are the companies who will like lead the torch on this one.
Great. I think it's a fascinating overview of, I think probably the right way to describe what you're saying is really the next generation of personalization. I mean, we started with the low-hanging fruit, and now it's the next evolution, as typically happens in technology. As more data is collected, as consumers become more savvier, as competition increases. How does everyone stay ahead of the pack? And I think you've given some very good examples of what companies can do to stay one step ahead of competition.
Sure. Yes.
Great. And as we come to the closing part of our segment of our conversation, the last segment. So these are what I call the five, five ones. So one future tech or trend that excites you.
Yeah, I think I've already mentioned it a few times. Shoppable media is a very big deal. I mean, I'm probably close to it because, China is a very important market for us. And, to be able to do, and it's not just live streaming, AMP for email is also shoppable media. It's essentially presenting more information to the consumer at the point of media consumption. So previously, email would have, an activity card and the name of the activity or whatever else it is, or a product and the product name. But now you can have so much more information. It can expand out. You can even start the purchase process there itself. So live streaming, polls, quizzes, people can start the purchase funnel there. I think it's a very big trend. It's already happening in Southeast Asia, and I think it's going to be a big thing in the future.
Pirshwan, tell us a little more on shoppable media, the live streaming part, because it's not yet come to India, and I know a lot of viewers are going to be in India. Just describe it a little bit more for people in India.
Yeah, it's a very simple concept. So again, it started off with the advent of high-speed data. So in China, you have these e-commerce companies who do these influencer-led live streaming events. So effectively, imagine a Virat Kohli, coming and talking about his favorite beard creams, right? So he maintains his beard, and Flipkart is, let's say, arranging that session. And while he's speaking about it, like the pop-ups are coming, like at the bottom, like as he's speaking on the same timestamp in real time, that same product is coming up, and people can. I think YouTube started this trend with the product placement ads, right? You've seen, right? So once a product is being mentioned in the video, the same card comes up below the video that people can buy. Now this has actually, that was recorded video. Now this has come to live streaming. It requires high-speed internet. So 4G, it was already getting supported, and now 5G, it's massive. In China, there are sales worth millions of dollars in a matter of minutes if a proper influencer comes and talks about the right products. Similarly, in Korea, it's happening in Indonesia now, very big deal, and also in other markets.
Great. So I'm looking forward to that. I think it's a fascinating new world that's coming up. So one tech trend that has disappointed you.
Disappointed me. I may get banned for this, but I feel chatbots are a hype. I don't believe they have delivered what they were supposed to. And being on both sides of it, both initially as a consumer, also later on when I wanted to activate it for marketing use cases, I realized that it has very specific use cases for customer support, and some cases where the consumer is really looking for information quickly. But as a marketing tool for demand generation as well as for demand capture, I feel it's hype. It's been a disappointment.
One good book recommendation?
This is something that I'm currently reading. I'm halfway through it, but I really like it. It's about this guy called Ed Thorp. He's a mathematician, and the name of the book is A Man for All Markets. I think it's really fascinating. So his whole life is about probability theory and how he's applied probability to a variety of outcomes. So he beat blackjack. He invested in the market. So it's mostly his autobiography, but also some part of investment advice. And it's a riveting book. I really like it so far.
So A Man for All Markets. Ed Thorp. Yeah. Yes. One good person or podcast which you would recommend that people follow?
This is very, very personal. I mean, it's like, it depends on a person's interest, but I tend to follow Hikaru Nakamura. He's like a grandmaster in chess, Blitz Chess, and he has his own YouTube channel. He has his podcast. And what is really fascinating about this guy is that chess players tend to have that image that they are geeky, very reserved, and all of this. What Hikaru does is, like, in his YouTube channel, he has a side-by-side video. He's active online playing chess with a bunch of players. He's beating them, of course. He's a 2900 rated chess player. He's a grandmaster. And at the same time, while beating these players, he's talking about a very cool topic or a random topic on the side. So last, I think 2 weeks back, he was talking about Japanese food. He was showing pictures of various Japanese food that he likes. And parallelly, he's playing chess and defeating people. And he's calling out what mistakes they are making and all. So he's a really amazing guy. And Hikaru Nakamura, you can follow him.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
And finally, one key belief that sort of drives your life.
Okay, I mean, again, this has been evolving quite a bit for me. I mean, initially, I started off as this guy who would plan for all various scenarios, have a plan ready, worst case, best case, all of this. And, as I have grown older, I have realized that, plan, but be ready to ditch the plan also. It's very important to improvise, because we can see what's happening around us, right, with COVID. Nobody planned for this. You cannot plan for this. So I think, I think that's my philosophy, that it's really good to plan. It's very important to plan, but at the same time, I try not to get married to my plan. So if the plan doesn't start working, I'm trying to like ditch it quickly and move on towards the next thing and improvise. So I think that's the philosophy.
Great. So thank you very much, Bibaswan. It was a fantastic conversation with you. I think you took us through what's really the next generation of personalization. I think it's a win-win for both sides, both for customers and for businesses. And I think given that we have compressed probably 3 or 4 years of e-commerce growth, I think the acceleration and also the data that's available now for companies and how they can now leverage that, I think is also going to go up. Great. It's a fantastic conversation.
Yeah. Thanks, Rajesh. Thanks for having me. Yeah.
So friends, that was Bibaswan on personalization and the new world that we are seeing. Thank you very much for having joined us at Martech Brain, and look forward to seeing you again next week with a new episode. Thank you.